Hello folks and welcome to the FrogWatch USA training. My name is Lily and I'm the Volunteer and Stewardship Coordinator here at Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park.
And my name is Jack. I'm a volunteer at Wilton Wildlife, and for my master's thesis I was studying frogs, so that's why I'm here to talk more about frogs.
So why are frogs important and what is FrogWatch USA? You will find out all of that in our slideshow. Let's get right into it. So FrogWatch USA is a citizen science program that's been running from 1998 to now. So this takes place from April to August, and the point is for citizens across the country to listen for frog calls to be able to identify what kind of frog it is. This gets sent into a national database which has been running for a very long time, and it's for anyone to participate in. So as we go through the slideshow, keep in mind that even though we're filming this in April 2023, this information is relevant year after year. It doesn't matter. You can be a FrogWatch certified volunteer in December, in January. This slideshow is here for you year round. So what does it mean to be a certified volunteer? So to be a certified volunteer means that by the end of this slideshow, you can identify 8 out of the 11 calls of frogs in Saratoga County. So once you can do this, you can go out and take data for yourself. So at the bottom of this video in the description underneath, there is a couple links to some guides you might need. So there's a field guide for frogs and toads, a wetland type chart, monitoring protocols, registration sheets, and observation sheets. You will need all of these once you're a certified volunteer and you're ready to go out and collect data. So why are we collecting this data and what does it really do? This data is important so we can describe the local species diversity, detect rare and invasive species, we can see shifts over time, and also it's an indicator for wetland health. So it's important to know how our wetlands are doing because this will inform land development strategies in the future. So now we'll get into some amphibian fundamentals.
All right. So, this is my job. So, amphibians are commonly known as cold-blooded, but the more accurate and scientific term is ectotherm, which essentially means that instead of producing their own body heat like you or I or birds and other mammals could, amphibians rely on the environment in order to regulate their body temperature. And so in order to heat up, they need to go sit in the sun. To cool down, they need to sit in the shade. And you may think that this is maladaptive because maybe on a cold day, then you would just be cold all the time. But it's actually pretty adaptive. So in order for mammals and birds to produce our own body heat, we need to have a very high metabolism, which means that we need to constantly be eating in order to feed that metabolism. Whereas ectotherms like amphibians and reptiles and other ectothermic species, they don't have that high of a metabolism, so they can go long stretches of time either without eating or without being very active. So that's actually a pretty adaptive trait. So a little background about amphibians. They appeared in the fossil record around 350 million years ago, making them one of the oldest classes of vertebrates here on planet Earth. They live some part of their life on land, some part of their life in water, and most have gills during at least one phase of their life cycle, especially if they have a tadpole stage. Now, there are exceptions to both of these rules, but we won't really get into that. And there are 3 orders of salamanders, or 3 main groups that you can classify, or not salamanders, amphibians, excuse me, that you can classify amphibians into. First group, I already told you, are the salamander group, so salamanders, newts, and things like that. Anurans is the second group, so frogs and toads. And then the third group is the caecilians, which are not Italian, but are in fact these worm-like amphibians, mainly found in the tropics that have evolved for a burrowing lifestyle. So, like I said, anuran is the term for both frogs and toads. So, a little background about frogs. Frogs have typically a smooth or slimy skin, and that wet skin helps them with gas exchange and makes their skin very permeable to other substances. They lay eggs in water in these big clusters, so in order to do that, they usually live in or near water. They have skinny bodies with long legs, perfect for hopping and jumping, and they have teeth in their upper jaw, which is pretty cool. Now, toads are the other side of the anuran coin, and they're a little more terrestrial than frogs are, so you're more likely to find them on land. And because of that, their skin is a little drier, They also have warts on their skin, and they have a parotoid gland, or two parotoid glands on the back of their neck, which hold all sorts of toxins. So if you ever pick up a toad, make sure you wash your hands afterwards. They have sort of fat bodies, short legs, they're kind of stout looking, and they lay eggs in these long strands in water. So although they're more terrestrial, they still need water in order to breed and lay eggs. And they don't have teeth like frogs do. Now, amphibians play an important role for both their environment and for us humans. So in the environment, in their ecosystem, they serve as both predators and prey. And for us humans, they're important for pest control, food for many people, education and research. If you've ever dissected a frog in biology class, you know what I'm talking about. And they're culturally significant to many people around the world. And they also serve as environmental or indicators of environmental health. So like I said earlier, their skin is very permeable to many substances, which makes them especially susceptible to toxins in their environment. And also because of their reliance on water, they're susceptible to changes in their environment as well. So you know if the amphibian populations are declining, something is awry in the environment. Now, unfortunately, amphibians around the world have been declining in recent years, and they are among the most threatened class of vertebrates around. So here are some stats just to give you a picture of that. So 41% of amphibian species are threatened with extinction. 143 are believed to have already gone extinct. Another 5% are considered near threatened. 20% are data deficient, so that means we just don't know enough about them to classify them as threatened, endangered, critically endangered, etc. At least a third of all species are declining in population, and in the US alone, 38 species of amphibians are classified as critically endangered, endangered, or vulnerable. So the headline is, amphibians are not doing so hot right now. So here are some reasons as to why their populations are declining. First and foremost is habitat loss. So deforestation, urbanization, conversion of land such as grasslands and wetlands to agricultural fields, those all have significant effects on amphibians because, like I said, they're susceptible to changes in their environment. Speaking of changes, climate change. So changes in weather patterns, increased drought, so warmer temperatures, those all have significant effects on amphibians. Pollution and contamination, things like, just what you would think of as pollution, road salt even can have detrimental impacts. Environmental changes, so invasive species, things like that. Disease, the chytrid fungus or BD is a big killer of amphibians, mainly in the tropics, although it's worked its way up into North America. And then harvesting and exploitation, so things like the pet trade, these all have significant impacts on amphibians. So what can we do to address these threats? So first and foremost, education and engagement. So things like FrogWatch USA are important for helping amphibian populations come back from being down in the dumps, essentially. Regulations, management, either by local, state, federal agencies of the frog populations or of their habitats, and research and monitoring either of the amphibian populations or the habitat are all important to helping these species survive.
Okay, so now let's get you all trained as FrogWatch certified volunteers. So let's go over some breeding basics. Males will arrive at these breeding sites first, and they are looking for females by making that call. Once the male encounters the female, he will attempt to mate with her. And if this is successful, the eggs are deposited into the water, and then externally, outside of the frog's body, or toad's body, they are fertilized by the male after they are laid. So when does the calling begin? So with this information, we're looking at the yellow colored frogs. So as we're looking, you can see that some of these start as early as February. Because most of them start in April, that's when we begin our frog watch, and it goes until the end of August. So take a second to look at those yellow colored frogs or pause your video if you're curious about when their call begins. So let's hop right into it. We have 11 frogs and toads to go over. If you want to take notes about each call or some information about them, we will go over the frog or toad, play their call for you, and then at the end of all of this, we will play the 11 calls in a mixed up order and you'll have to guess which one is which. So starting off strong is the American bullfrog. So you can see the map in the top left. The American bullfrog is all over New York. It is 3 to 8 inches, making it the largest frog in North America. So it's got a white throat, it's an aquatic species, and it will eat anything, including small birds and young snakes. Its mating season is late April to the end of summer, and you'll find this in slow-moving water, so ponds, lakes, streams with vegetation, usually at the edge of the water. So we'll play the American bullfrog call for you. It's a deep-pitched jug-a-rum sound. So here it is now.
All right, so up next we have the green frog. So these frogs look very similar to the bullfrog, except they're a little bit smaller. They also have two dorsolateral ridges, which just means they have two ridges along their back, sort of behind their eyes. Their mating season is early May to mid-June, and they live close to shallow waters, streams, swamps, the edges of ponds and lakes. And just by looking at the map in the top left corner, they're so abundant in New York that you're likely to run into these guys. So their call is sort of like the twang of a banjo or of a rubber band, given as a single note, as a burst of sound in rapid succession, and then progressively getting quieter.
So up next, we've got the mink frog. So you can see the mink frog has the green with the black spots on their back. They're about 1 to 3 inches. They're found along waterways. They like borders of lakes, ponds, cold water where streams are entering. And as you can see in this photo, they love water lilies. You will often find water lilies in their habitat. And as you can see in the map, they're clustered northern, up to northern New York, mainly in the Adirondacks, but you can see them in Saratoga County. So this is a buried deep kind of cut, cut, cut sort of noise, and we'll play it for you now.
Okay, up next is the northern leopard frog. So it is named the northern leopard frog because of its spots, like a leopard. It also has two dorsolateral ridges on its back that are typically lighter in color. It's 2 to 5 inches, and its mating season is mid-March through May. Their habitat is a wide variety of things, from freshwater with lots of vegetation to brackish marshes, and they're another very abundant species here in New York. So their call is sort of a low guttural snore lasting about 3 seconds, but the key thing to pay attention to is it's followed by several clucking notes. So we'll play that for you now.
So next up we have the pickerel frog. So the pickerel frog is a bit smaller, about 1.75 inches to 3 inches. It is another spotted frog, but the spots are more square, as you can see in that photo. Again, it also has two dorsal ridges going down the back, and the skin secretions are somewhat toxic. So as Jack says, this is not a frog that you want to lick. So mating season is from late March to early May, and this frog prefers slow-moving waters, swamps, wet meadows, lots of vegetation, and as you can see, they are all over New York. So the pickerel frog has a steady, low, snore-like croak that's quite raspy. It sounds like two inflated balloons rubbing up against each other.
All right. Moving on to the gray tree frog. So, tree frogs in general are smaller than your stereotypical frog. So, for example, these guys are about an inch to 2.5 inches in length. They can change color from green to gray and vice versa, depending on their environment. So, that's a pretty cool trait that they have. Their mating season is late April through late July, and their habitat, as their name suggests, is in trees and shrubs growing near permanent bodies of water. So they live up in those trees, and then when mating season comes around, they come down to those bodies of water to lay their eggs. So their call is a hearty, resonating trill, usually heard during their mating season, which is spring and early summer.
The northern spring peeper. We all know the northern spring peeper. It is that tiny frog living in the vernal pools in the side of the road, ditches, and you can hear their peep from a mile away. These tiny frogs usually are up to 1.5 inches, but never bigger. And you can see in this picture, they've got a dark X on the back of their body. So this is one of the first signs of spring. Usually you'll hear the spring peeper before any other frog. They're all over New York and they will peep from March to late May. So they like to breed in vernal pools, but then, like the tree frog, they retreat into moist wooded areas for the rest of the summer. And you'll hear their call next. They've got that high-pitched ascending whistle. Sometimes it's a short trill, but they are a chorus frog, so usually it's overlapping sounds that make a peep, peep, peep.
Right. So now we're moving on to the toads, and we have the American toad next. So of all the toads we talk about here today, the American toad is by far the most common, just by looking at the map in the upper left-hand corner. But if you see a toad in the wild, you should always double check just to make sure that you're right. So they're about 2 to 4 inches, and they pretty much check all the boxes of your stereotypical toad. They have that dry, warty skin. They have those parotoid glands on the back of their neck. They lay eggs in long strands, and they are explosive breeders, which means they lay thousands of eggs in a very short period of time, and they're laying those eggs in shallow pools of water. So their mating season is early April through June. And as most toads are, they're terrestrial, so you'll find them in mowed grassy yards, mountainous regions, pretty much anywhere that there's abundant moisture and vegetation. So their call is sort of like a musical trill lasting about 5 to 30 seconds. It's sort of like a cross between a whistle and a hum, and we'll play it for you now.
All right, up next we've got the Fowler's toad. So the Fowler's toad is 2.5 inches to 3.5 inches. It's usually found more south, but there have been sightings in Saratoga County, so we like to keep a lookout for them. They can crossbreed with the American toad that Jack just talked about, which makes them a little more common. So they've got 3 or more warts in their dorsal spots, and they have a single dark spot on their white chest and belly. So those are pretty noticeable characteristics. They mate from late April to early July, and they like sandier areas. So they're going to backyards, irrigation ditches, marshes, temporary rain pools. They like to bury in the ground during hot periods and during the winter, so they're looking for that water. So their call is a descending, raw kind of sound. It's very whiny, sort of like a baby crying or like a nasally sheep sound. So here we go.
All right, now we have the eastern spadefoot toad. So the spadefoot's distinguishing characteristic is that cat-like eye, the vertical pupil that it has. That's unique among all the toads that we talk about today. They're a little bit smaller, 1.5 to 2 inches, And they also have sort of red, orange, and black warts on their body, as well as 2 light stripes on their back, sort of where those dorsolateral ridges are in other frogs. They're called spadefoots because they use their feet to burrow into the ground. And so because of that, they prefer areas with sandy soils, such as, for example, the Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park, which is known for its sandy soils. You can find the eastern spadefoot in the park and on the grounds, which is pretty cool. And that's about as far north as they get east of the Mississippi. Spadefoots in general are concentrated west of the Mississippi in the western states. The eastern spadefoot on the eastern side of the Mississippi is mainly found in the southern states. So to find them up here, this is about as far north as you're going to find the eastern spadefoot. So their call is sort of like a repeated over a short period of time, but we'll play it for you now so you can hear it.
All right, so next we've got the wood frog. So the wood frog is 1.5 inches to 3.25 inches. They've got a variety of coloring. They can be brown, tan, rust, even a pinkish. They can be dark black. It sort of depends, but what we're looking for on these frogs is the dark lines you can see going over their back legs. And they've got a very distinctive white belly. So the wood frog is abundant across the state of New York. They're looking for moist woodlands and open grasslands. They are also in the tundra in the northern areas, but we don't have to worry about that. It's just a fun fact. So their sound is a series of short and raspy quacks. They're somewhat muted and they don't project very far. So if you do hear this frog, you are probably very close. All right, so now it's time to test your skills. So we are going to play the frog calls in a random order. If you get 8 out of 11 correct, then you are a certified FrogWatch volunteer. If you don't get 8 out of 11 correct, you can rewatch this slideshow. All of the sounds will be in the link in the description at the bottom of this video, so you can always play them again and come back and try again later. You can take notes during this time. If you took notes during the presentation, feel free to use those notes. So here we go, let's test your knowledge.
So this is call number 1. So we're playing it now for you. All right, so that was call number 1. So take a minute and take a guess as to what it is. Up next is call number 2. All right, moving on to call number 3. Here we go. So that was call 3. Now on to call number 4. So that was call 4. Now we're on to number 5. Here we go. So on to call number 6. Okay. So that was call 6. On to number 7 now. You're doing great. Now we're on to call number 8. I did not mean for that to rhyme, it just happened. So that was call number 8. Now we're moving on to call number 9. So 2 more. This next one is call number 10. And last but not least, we have call number 11. Here it is.
If you need to go back and listen to any of the calls for a second, third, fourth, or fifth time, that is totally okay. Feel free to take your time in this section. It's important that you can identify each of these calls, and there's no rush to getting to that point. So now we'll reveal the order of the frogs. So frog number 1 was the Pickerel Frog. Frog number 2 was the Eastern Spadefoot. Frog number 3 was the Spring Peeper. Frog number 4 was the Gray Treefrog. Frog number 5 was the American Bullfrog. Frog number 6 was the Green Frog. Frog number 7 was the American Toad. Frog number 8 was the Leopard Frog. Frog number 9 was the Fowler's Toad. Frog number 10 was the Wood Frog. And frog number 11 was the Mink Frog. So if you got 8 out of 11 correct, congratulations, you are an official FrogWatch certified volunteer. If you didn't get them correct, that's okay. Continue to review the information, and when you feel confident and you have 8 out of 11, then you will be a certified FrogWatch volunteer.
All right, so let's briefly go over wetlands. So it's important that we go over wetlands because all of the data collected for FrogWatch USA is collected by a wetland, because this is where frogs and toads project their mating calls, breed, and lay eggs. So it's important that you know what kind of wetlands you'll be doing your surveys next to, so that when you enter your data, you are entering the correct type of wetland. So wetlands are characterized or defined by 3 major characteristics. The first is the presence of plants that are known to grow in saturated soil conditions. The second is our soils that lack oxygen. And the third is water needs to be at or near the surface during at least part of the growing season. So this chart you can find in the link in below the video. This is a chart of the different kinds of wetlands you're likely to run into in your surveys here in New York. I'll go over them briefly, but it's up to you to familiarize yourself with the different kinds of wetlands, so when you go out and do your FrogWatch surveys, you know what kind of body of water you're standing next to. So up first is a pond. These are flooded year-round, similar to lakes, but a little bit smaller, a little bit shallower. Swamps, typically dominated by woody vegetation, so trees, and usually are covered in leaf litter on the ground. Bogs and fens are typically dominated by mosses, although fens have a little bit more plant diversity because their soils are a little more nutrient rich. Marshes are sort of what you'd think of as your stereotypical wetland, sort of dominated by grasses and reeds, flooded year-round. A wet meadow, think of like a flooded lawn or a flooded agricultural field. A vernal pool is a temporary body of water, usually produced by rainwater or meltwater that sort of disappears as time goes on. So it's not around all the time. A ditch, so think of like an irrigation ditch or a ditch on the side of the road, typically man-made. And then urban wetlands are wetlands that you'd find in an urban setting, also man-made. So think of ponds in golf courses, city fountains, ponds in city parks, things like that.
So how do you pick a site and how do you actually collect data for FrogWatch USA? Well, I'll tell you. So how to pick a site, you want something that is legal for you to access. You want it to be convenient because you're usually collecting at dusk, so you don't want to be hiking too far unless that's something you like, which is fine. You want it to be quiet. You don't want car horns or trains going by, so you can really hear the frog calls. And you want it to be safe for the evening. Because you'll be there at sunset or after, you want a place that you're comfortable in even during the dark. So for weather, we are looking for a temperature above 35 degrees Fahrenheit. We're not opposed to rain or wind, but if it's too windy or rainy, then the frogs might not be out or their calls might not be as strong. So you want to avoid that sort of weather. We would like you to go out at least 30 minutes after sunset, and you must monitor your site at least once a month, but you can go as frequently as you would like. So what should you bring when you go out there? You should definitely bring the monitoring protocol sheet. All of this information is down in that link in the description. I like to bring a clipboard or a notebook to write on top of, a pen or a pencil, a thermometer because you will have to report what the temperature is, and you want to watch because you are going to watch these frogs for a designated amount of time, so having a stopwatch, a wristwatch, or a phone can be very helpful. So how do you do this? You're going to enter your volunteer site and information on the FrogWatch USA data sheet. Then you'll record the weather information, which is temperature over the last 48 hours, precipitation over the last 48 hours, and wind speed. So how do you figure out wind speed? We've got this convenient little chart here for you, and we like to imagine it using smoke or leaves. So a 0 is calm. If you made a fire, the smoke would rise vertically and wouldn't move at all. Number 1 is light air. So the smoke is going to rise and maybe it'll move slightly to one side or the other. At a number 2, we can hear the leaves rustle and you can feel wind on your face. Number 3 is leaves and twigs are in constant motion. They're not going to stop moving. Anything over a 3 is too windy to monitor, so you'll have to go back a different time. Monitoring protocol. So you are going to do your observations once a month from April to August. When you get to your location, there is a 2-minute acclimation period. This is so the frog can adjust to your presence and go back to doing what they do. So after that 2-minute acclimation period, you're going to set your watch or your timer for 3 minutes exactly. Even if you hear a brand new call right after that 3 minutes, it does not count. Because this is a nationwide survey and we're contributing our data to other people who are doing this as well, it's really important that we follow these protocols so all of the data can be standardized. So a fun tip is you might want to record it on your phone or on a recording device so that way you don't have to identify every frog in the moment. You can listen back to the recording and identify them from there. So if there's any sort of noise during your recording session, your phone rings, there's a car horn, your friend says, hey, come over here, that does not count. You have to begin your entire process over again, including the 2-minute acclimation period and then the 3 minutes of listening to frog calls. And remember to record the call intensity of your species. And when we show you a picture of a monitoring sheet and data sheet, you'll understand what that means. So call intensity, we're jumping right into it. So a 0 is no frogs or toads can be heard. A 1 is individuals can be counted and there's space in between the calls. Number 2 is calls can be distinguished, but there's some overlapping. And number 3 is constant calls, they're overlapping. It's a full chorus of frogs and you cannot separate one from the other.
All right, so now let's talk about how you would enter your survey data and your site data into the FrogWatch USA database. So step 1 is to go to this website that you see on the top of the slide, frogwatch.next.fieldscope.org. And once you go to that website, you will click on the login button in the top right corner. And when you do so, you will either log in if you've already created an account, which is great, or you will create an account, all right? So this is a pretty simple setup. Yep. So it's just like creating an account with any other website. So you'll enter a name, create a password, enter your email address, and you will also need to enter your local FrogWatch chapter. In the case of Saratoga County, the chapter is the Wilton Wildlife Preserve and Park. All right. So once you have all that information, you will be sent an email to verify your account. Check your spam if it doesn't come to your inbox. But once you get that email, you can go back to the FrogWatch website and you can log in. And when you do so, then your name should appear in the top right corner, indicating that you've logged in and now you're ready to start entering data. So the next thing you'll want to do is to register a survey site. So what you'll do, under observations, you should click previously used stations, and you can click on the little add button to create a new station. And using the map feature, you can zoom in on a spot or a location where you're planning to do a survey and click that point on the map. This way you don't have to remember the coordinates of your site. It'll generate the coordinates for you. So then what you should do is you should use this sheet that we have here. This is, again, one of the sheets that is in the link below this, this video. And this is your survey site registration form. So when you visit your site, you're going to look at what kind of wetland it is, name it, you can give it a standard name like pond near my house, or you can give it a fun name. Get creative here. And other sorts of data. And so you'll collect that out in the field and then bring it back to your computer and enter all that survey site registration data into the website. Alternatively, you could use a previously registered survey site. So again, under observations, you will click all stations, and then when you look at the map feature below, all these little red dots are previously registered survey sites. So if you find that there's a survey site nearby, or a previously registered survey site nearby your house or where you work, and you're thinking this is a lot better than what I had in mind, then you can use one of those sites. So the first thing you want to do is either register a new site or get a previously existing site. So now, if you're ready to enter your survey data from your frog survey, then you will click the Add Data button in the top right corner, that green button. And essentially, you'll take the data you collected out on your survey and you'll enter it into the database. So on the left here is your survey sheet that has information such as frog and toad observations, call intensity, visit information, weather conditions. All this data is going to be transferred onto the database, just as you see it on the right there. And you can also add things such as photos, videos, audio, and things like that. But mainly you're entering that data from your survey.
So that's it. That's how you become a certified FrogWatch volunteer and start to bring data into this nationwide collection of frog and toad information nationwide.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at info@wiltonpreserve.org. You can also visit our website, wiltonpreserve.org, and contact us through there. We have lots of upcoming events. Usually in the spring, we'll go out and do FrogWatch surveying together. So keep a lookout for those events. And if you have any other questions, check the description below, because that's where we will have this presentation, every frog and toad call that we played for you, and all of the sheets that you will need to do this monitoring.
Thanks for watching, and happy frog watching.
Woohoo!